Red Bull is not being watched because Verstappen crashed. Red Bull is being watched because the crash may have exposed something much bigger. At the Red Bull Ring, in Q3, Max Verstappen lost the rear at turn 9, slammed into the barriers, and triggered the yellow flags that changed the entire pole fight. Russell crossed the line fastest. Ferrari was left furious. The stewards had to review the chaos. And then another Red Bull name was pulled into the spotlight. Austrian Hadjar, a Red Bull representative. A safety-related summons. An alleged slow driving breach in qualifying. Suddenly, this was not just one crash. It was a pattern. Rear axle problems in Australia. Deployment frustration. A dangerous high-speed snap in Austria. A teammate under investigation. And a team that once controlled Formula One now looks like it is fighting its own car, its own mistakes, and the governing body's attention at the same time. If this is just one bad weekend, Red Bull can survive it. But if Austria proved the car is unstable, the operations are messy, and Verstappen no longer trusts what is underneath him, then this is not an investigation story. It is the beginning of Red Bull's most dangerous crisis in years. Subscribe to the channel. The first thing that makes Austria so dangerous for Red Bull is that the weekend did not create one problem. It connected several. And in Formula One, that is when a team starts to look vulnerable. One crash can be explained. One summons can be handled. One frustrated radio message can be dismissed as heat of the moment. One bad qualifying session can be written off as a weekend that never came together. But when all of those things start appearing around the same team, at the same circuit, in the same season, the story changes. It stops looking like bad luck. It starts looking like a system under stress. That is exactly what Austria did to Red Bull. Max Verstappen's crash at turn 9 was the image everyone saw first. The Red Bull snapped away, slid through the gravel, and hit the barriers at the team's own home circuit. That alone would have been painful enough. A four-time world champion, in a Red Bull, crashing at the Red Bull Ring, during the most important part of qualifying. But the crash did not end with Verstappen. It spread. The yellow flags came out. The final laps were compromised. George Russell passed through the affected area, completed his lap, and took pole. Ferrari felt it had lost a genuine chance at the front. The stewards had to examine what happened. Mercedes had to defend Russell's lift. The paddock had another argument about safety, interpretation, and whether a driver should be allowed to keep a lap alive after a crash. And then Red Bull had another issue. Austrian Hadjar and a Red Bull representative were summoned over an alleged breach connected to driving unnecessarily slowly in qualifying. That may not sound as explosive as Verstappen hitting the barrier, but it matters. Because qualifying is one of the most dangerous environments in Formula One when drivers are moving at different speeds. One car may be building tire temperature. Another may be on a full attack lap. One driver may be looking for track position. Another may arrive at high speed with almost no time to react. That speed difference can become dangerous very quickly. So when the governing body looks at unnecessary slow driving, it is not just checking paperwork. It is checking safety. And that is what makes the Red Bull weekend look so messy. A high-speed crash from Verstappen. A yellow flag controversy that changed the pole fight. A separate Red Bull summons for Hadjar. A team already carrying months of technical frustration. All of it in one weekend. All of it at their own track. That is not the kind of picture Red Bull wants the world to see. Because Red Bull used to be the team that looked controlled when everyone else looked emotional. They used to make chaos happen around them, not inside their own garage. They used to arrive at weekends with the quiet confidence of a team that knew the car, knew the driver, knew the strategy, and knew the result would probably come to them if they executed properly. Austria did not feel like that. Austria felt like Red Bull reacting. Reacting to the crash. Reacting to the damage. Reacting to the stewards. Reacting to the questions. Reacting to another sign that the 2026 car may still not be fully understood. That is the core of the story. Not just the investigation angle. The loss of control. Because when a team loses control in Formula One, the first thing it loses is not always lap time. It loses authority. And Red Bull's authority was built over years. Verstappen winning. Red Bull dominating. Rivals chasing. The team making the difficult look routine. The car giving Max the platform to attack corners with a level of violence and precision that made the rest of the grid look like it was racing in a different category. That image is now cracked. Mercedes is no longer watching Red Bull disappear into the distance. Ferrari is no longer waiting for Red Bull to make the first move. McLaren is no longer treating Verstappen as untouchable. And the governing body is not ignoring Red Bull's messy weekends just because the team has history. That is why Austria matters. It showed that Red Bull can be pulled into the same pressure spiral as everyone else. And once rivals see that, they attack differently. Ferrari attacks the yellow flag interpretation. Mercedes protects the pole and watches Red Bull fall further into explanation mode. McLaren looks at the points and senses opportunity. The media circles the radio messages, the crash footage, the investigation notes, and the championship table. Suddenly, Red Bull is not setting the agenda. Red Bull is the agenda. That is a very different kind of pressure. And it lands hardest on Verstappen. Because Verstappen is still expected to be the solution. When the car is difficult, people expect him to drag it forward. When qualifying goes wrong, people expect him to recover. When Red Bull falls behind, people expect him to produce something savage enough to hide the weakness. For years, he did that. But 2026 has made that job much harder. The regulations change the cars in ways that go deep into how they feel. Active aerodynamics. More complex energy deployment. A different power balance. More importance on recovery systems and rear stability. A car that must be efficient, powerful, stable, and predictable while systems are constantly working in the background. That kind of machine can be fast. But if it is not predictable, it becomes a problem even for the best driver in the world. And Verstappen has already felt that. Australia was the warning. The rear axle locked under braking, suddenly, violently, in a way Verstappen said he had never experienced before. He spun. He hit the barrier. He sounded angry because the car did not behave like a car he understood. That moment mattered because it was not just a crash. It was a loss of trust. Then came more signs. Deployment frustration. Steering complaints. Strange behavior. A driver sounding less like he was fine-tuning a competitive car, and more like he was trying to identify what the car might do next. That is a serious difference. A driver can work with a difficult car. He can adapt to understeer. He can adapt to oversteer. He can adapt to a narrow operating window. But he cannot fully attack with a car that surprises him. Surprise is the enemy. And turn 9 in Austria looked like surprise. The corner demanded commitment. Verstappen gave it commitment. The car did not give him the rear stability he needed. The snap came too quickly. The gravel took over. The barrier ended the lap. That is why the crash feels like a symptom, not just a mistake. And if the crash is a symptom, then the question becomes bigger. What is the illness? Is Red Bull struggling to make the active aero platform stable at high speed? Is the energy recovery and braking behavior still too unpredictable? Is the rear axle behavior creating moments Verstappen cannot anticipate? Is the team chasing performance in a window too narrow to be safe from mistakes? Is the car giving just enough pace to tempt Verstappen, but not enough consistency to protect him? Those are the questions Red Bull cannot answer with confidence alone. They need the car to answer. Because the paddock will not forget. Formula One has a ruthless memory. It remembers when a car locks unexpectedly. It remembers when a champion complains. It remembers when a team is summoned. It remembers when a crash triggers a controversy that benefits a rival. It remembers when dominance turns into defense. And right now, Red Bull is defending too much. Defending the car. Defending the weekend. Defending the operations. Defending Verstappen's position in a season where he is not where anyone expected him to be. That is not where a championship team wants to live. The most dangerous part is that Red Bull's problems are not isolated to one side of the garage. Verstappen is dealing with the car's instability and the pressure of lost dominance. Hadjar is now connected to a steward's matter over qualifying behavior. The team is being watched operationally and technically. The car is being questioned. The drivers are under scrutiny. The championship table is unforgiving. That is a complete pressure environment. And complete pressure environments reveal cracks. A team can hide a small crack when it is winning. Wins cover everything. A fast car makes tense radios sound like perfectionism. A big points lead makes mistakes feel temporary. A dominant driver makes mechanical frustration look like a minor inconvenience. But when the wins disappear, every crack becomes visible. That is what Red Bull is experiencing. Verstappen's frustration no longer sounds like a champion demanding perfection from the front. It sounds like a champion warning that the foundation is not stable. That is a brutal shift. And it changes how rivals treat Red Bull. When a team looks stable, rivals hesitate to waste energy attacking them. But when a team looks unstable, rivals challenge everything. They protest more. They question more. They pressure more. They force explanations. They test the emotional strength of the garage. Ferrari knows this. Mercedes knows this. Every top team knows this. That is why Austria is so damaging. Because it gave rivals proof that Red Bull can be made uncomfortable. Not in theory. In public. At their own circuit. With their champion in the barrier. With their rookie teammate under steward's attention. With the pole fight reshaped by their crash. That is a horrible combination. And it creates a narrative Red Bull must kill quickly. The narrative says the team is no longer in command of the new regulations. It says the RB22 has speed, but not enough trust. It says Verstappen is still brilliant, but the car is pulling him into danger. It says the team's execution is messy. It says the old aura is fading. Narratives can be unfair, but they become dangerous when they feel believable. And Austria made this one feel believable. That is why the wording around the investigation matters. The source does not confirm that the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile opened a direct investigation into Red Bull purely because Verstappen crashed. The more precise picture is that Russell was reviewed after the crash because of the yellow flag situation, and Hadjar, with a Red Bull representative, was summoned over an alleged slow driving breach. That distinction is important. But it does not save Red Bull from the bigger problem. Because the weekend still placed Red Bull in the center of multiple safety-related conversations. A high-speed crash. Yellow flags. A reviewed pole lap. A Red Bull driver summoned for qualifying conduct. All while Verstappen's car history already raised questions about rear stability and system behavior. That is the kind of environment where people start connecting dots. And Red Bull will hate that, because not every dot may belong together. A Hadjar slow driving matter is not the same thing as Verstappen losing the rear at turn 9. Russell's yellow flag review is not the same thing as a Red Bull technical failure. Verstappen's Australian rear lock is not automatically the same cause as his Austrian crash. But Formula One pressure does not wait for perfect connections. It builds from perception. And the perception is that Red Bull is surrounded by problems. That is enough to matter. Because perception affects confidence. Inside the team, engineers feel the urgency. Drivers feel the spotlight. Strategists know mistakes will be magnified. Team leadership knows every answer must be careful. Mechanics know every rebuild carries symbolic weight. Rivals know every weakness can be attacked. That is how pressure enters a garage. Not with one explosion. With a constant tightening. And for Red Bull, the tightening has been happening all season. The championship standings make it worse. Verstappen is not fighting from the comfortable front. Red Bull is not controlling the constructors' battle. Mercedes and Ferrari are ahead in the new era. The old hierarchy has shifted. Every lost qualifying session makes the gap harder to close. Every crash gives rivals more breathing room. Every investigation note adds another layer to the story that Red Bull is no longer clean. That is the danger of falling from dominance. When you are used to being hunted, you know who you are. When you become the hunter again, every mistake feels unfamiliar. Red Bull is now hunting. And hunting from behind requires precision. You cannot afford damaged cars. You cannot afford messy qualifying behavior. You cannot afford uncertainty in the car. You cannot afford your champion to wonder if the rear will stay with him in a high-speed corner. That last point is the most important. Because Red Bull's entire recovery depends on Verstappen trusting the car again. If he trusts it, he can still do extraordinary things. He can still drag lap time out of a narrow window. He can still make rivals feel uncomfortable. He can still turn a difficult race into a points rescue. But if he does not trust it, Red Bull loses more than speed. It loses Max at full force. And Max at full force is what made Red Bull terrifying. Without that, Red Bull becomes another team trying to solve a complicated car under pressure. Still dangerous. Still capable. But no longer inevitable. That word matters. Inevitable. Red Bull used to feel inevitable. Austria made them feel uncertain. And uncertainty is contagious. If the driver is uncertain, the garage feels it. If the garage is uncertain, the strategy wall feels it. If the strategy wall is uncertain, rivals sense it. If rivals sense it, they attack harder. That is how a team's aura collapses. Not all at once. Little by little. A strange crash in Australia. A frustrated radio message. A difficult championship start. A high-speed snap in Austria. A teammate summons. A weekend where Red Bull's home track becomes the backdrop for Mercedes and Ferrari's fight, not Red Bull's statement. That is how the aura fades. And once it fades, it has to be earned back. Reputation is not enough. History is not enough. For championships are not enough. The car has to be stable now. The team has to execute now. Verstappen has to trust the rear now. Hadjar has to stay out of Stewart's trouble now. Red Bull has to stop giving rivals reasons to believe the collapse is real. That is why the Austrian investigation story, even when corrected, still has force. Because the precise details may be more complicated than the headline, but the emotional truth is simple. Red Bull looked exposed. That is the first major turn in the story.